I very much appreciate the invitation. Happy to be with you all today. This is my first session as chair of the Environmental Conservation Committee, though I've been a member for many, many years. And I am excited that the governor has called up our geothermal well bill, and I think that that is going to actually get signed and hopefully will make it easier for individuals who are looking to move towards geothermal heating and cooling to do so with less red tape and therefore maybe less cost. Most of these that go below 500 feet are really commercial operations, so or extraordinarily large houses, and so that's a good thing. I'm pleased to work with Senator Harckham. We came to an agreement late in the session on a wonderful extended producer responsibility bill. I want to thank him and his team for being such great partners and a pleasure to work with. Not always the case in the legislature, but he's a dream. We are hopeful that in my office that our birds and bees protection bill, which limits seed coatings on corn, soybean, and wheat, will in fact get signed by the governor. It's passed both houses, as has our ban on wildlife killing contests and the prohibition on transporting horses for slaughter for human and animal consumption. So those are the bills that we have focused on that are within the environmental protection realm. Obviously, we just came off of a very exciting roundtable on composting. And I think that it's very important for us to remove as much food waste from the landfills as possible, and that's sort of a low-hanging fruit in terms of reducing methane emissions from landfills. So there's a lot within that area that we're going to be working on. I've had the opportunity to take a couple of farm tours, which weren't strictly farms, but also included things like a stop at the Finger Lakes Water Institute, which was fascinating, and meetings with soil and water conservation folks, as well as meetings with folks who are doing wastewater treatment. So there's a lot on our plates. There's a lot we have to get done. I'm excited and energized by the people I've met around the state. I'm thrilled to be with you today to hear your questions, which will help inform us of the work we have to do. The committee did do a number of things, including a bill that was sponsored by Assemblymember Otis with Senator Mayer that encourages any shoreline work to give a preference to the natural barriers as opposed to hard barriers. So when they're doing work on shoreline, that it should be using soft, natural, maybe wetlands or so forth to reduce flooding. New York City is doing some work on expanding our tree canopy, which is exciting. And I think that we have to do a lot more work on invasive species, both aquatic and terrestrial. And it's going to be a busy year. I think our top priority will be the EPR, but we will also be advancing things like low impact landscaping and prohibiting certainly HOAs from forcing people to have turf lawns, as well as thinking once we get that done, we'll move on to municipalities. But we think that encouraging people people want to help, and we need to make it easy for New Yorkers to do the right thing and to participate as fully as they can in addressing environmental concerns. And some of it is education, some of it is providing grants. The EPF is now at $400 million, with a lot of money going to a wide range of projects and in water quality and so forth. And we're going to be working with the department to see how they plan to address Bond Act monies and how they are going to review projects. Right now, I don't think we have a lot of information, which is somewhat disappointing, but not surprising. And that's what we hope to focus on going forward. And of course, in a tough budget year, which we may have, holding on to a $400 million mark for the Environmental Protection Fund will be at the top of our list. So thanks very much. I look forward to the questions.
Great, thank you. Senator Harckham, I'll give you 5 minutes here to introduce yourself and talk about your priorities.
Sure, thanks so much. Hi, Kate. Thanks for having me, and thanks to Simon, and who I've known for many years, and Steve Otis, of course, and big shout out to my friend and my colleague and my partner, Assemblymember Glick. Chair Glick and her team are tremendous partners and great to work with. She gave a great recap of last year. A couple other things. Big bill regionally was the Save the Hudson bill, and thank Chair Glick for her leadership on that, which will prevent radiological wastewater from being dumped into the Hudson River from the decommissioning process of the Indian Point nuclear plant. And what we're seeing is outrage about that all over the world. We're seeing it in Massachusetts, we're seeing it in China and Korea about Fukushima. And the notion that regulators have been pushing is that there's safe levels of pollution. I think the people are standing up and saying there are no levels of pollution that are safe. So, I think that was an important bill, an important statement to make, that we as a state are no longer going to allow our water bodies to be treated as convenient dumping grounds for industrial waste simply because it's cost effective. So that was a big one. Lot of talk always on climate change, as should be. Cap and invest was the beginnings were rolled out in the budget. Glad we got robust labor standards in there. The governor's office will be rolling out some proposed rules at the end of the year, so we look forward to commenting on those. As Chair Glick mentioned, the Bond Act rules should be coming out. Proposed rules should be coming out this fall. There are a lot of important things in there. And as we look forward, a lot of things have some synergy between the EPF and the Bond Act. But some of the bigger things we need to look at, water quality. One of the things that makes New York competitive going forward is our abundance of freshwater resources. While we see whole sections of the country literally drying up from poor water use management. But so we need to protect our water. My district is the East of Hudson watershed for New York City. So we've been dealing with phosphorus issues and invasive species, as Chair Glick mentioned, for quite some time. New York State is one of the very few in the country that actually classify alum as an herbicide. It's used in the rest of the country to lock in phosphorus in the sediment so that we're not getting these harmful algal blooms. So we'll have some legislation coming on that. Emerging contaminants, PFAS, PFOA, is a really big issue. The governor had a proposal in the budget to begin to address emerging contaminants. It wasn't quite there for either of the chambers of the legislature, but we look forward to doing more work on that. Just a local example, the elementary school next to my house is now all on bottled water because of PFAS contamination from firefighting foam. So, our freshwater drinking water supplies are something that we're going to have to really spend a lot of time working on as we go forward. But I want to also take a second to thank all of you for all of the work that you do, because so much of this is done locally. Chair Glick and I we like to think we have an impact at the state, and we do, but a lot of the impact is locally, and that's because of the work that all of you do. New York State's greenhouse gases are down 15% in the last 20 years, 8% in the last 4, and a lot of that is because of local initiatives. A lot of the ideas that are bubbling up about things like how we protect our drinking water supplies and how we address water pollution come from local communities and local organizations like you. And so I really want to thank you for everything that you do. Please open door. I'll put my contact info in the chat. Any ideas you have, we really appreciate. I'll be on the road next week in Central New York, meeting with local environmental groups and colleagues from the Senate and the Assembly in Central New York. And that's how Chair Glick and I learn. We travel the state, we speak to local stakeholders, and then we take that information back to the state. So, anything you think we need to be focused on, we're happy to take up. It's always a partnership, and it's great to be here with all of you, and thanks for having me.
All right, thank you both. Now, to everyone in this panel, we're going to allow the chat to be where you put in questions if you would like, or please raise your hand and I will allow you to unmute and turn off on your video if you want to ask a question directly. And to kick off, our first question is NYSAG Chair Simon.
President Simon, but that's okay.
Oh, sorry.
I'm very pleased to have you. As I said before we started recording, it's really an honor to have the two top leaders joining us in the conference. And I really want to start off with a question that I have a unique perspective on in that the two sponsors in the Assembly and the state are in my district, and I'm talking about the wetlands bill. This was a bill that allows local municipalities who have a wetlands commission to regain the ability, call it home rule, regaining home rule over what can be put into their wetlands, what kind of, in many cases, ponds, for example, or lakes, where people are allowed to put in herbicides, algicides, and the only governing group is the DEC. And again, we highly respect the DEC, but in many cases, we found that the ability to do these kind of applications are going on when they really shouldn't be. And so this particular bill was sponsored by Chris Burdick, who happened to be our ex-town supervisor, and of course Pete Harckham in the Senate. So my question really to you is that we have 100 municipalities in New York State, and that, by the way, came from NYSAC. We have an ordinance library that we've collected all the ordinances throughout from our members, and we have over 100 different municipalities in New York State that have wetland commissions. So that is a sizable number of communities that would be given local authority. This particular bill was passed last year by both the House and the Senate, and it was vetoed by the governor. And it again is being passed. It was passed this year by the House and the Senate, and it's before the governor for her signature. So my question to you is, what are the compelling reasons that we as local communities can send out to the governor's office to convince her that this is an extremely important bill that she needs to sign? And as you all know, the EPA stripped authority over tens of thousands of, if not millions of acres of protection. So wetlands are really an important part of our state as well as our country. So I'll just throw that out to both of you. What can we send to our governor that will convince her to sign it?
Well, Simon, I think you touched on it. It's home rule versus DEC. Let's remember 2 years ago we had a massive victory when both the Assembly and the Senate came together on a deal. Both chambers had different perspectives on protecting wetlands, and we came together on a deal that will protect over 1 million acres of wetlands. So and that bill was signed into law. So we're coming at this from a good place already. But as you said, the local rule of pesticide application in wetlands governed by local municipalities. That's something that DEC feels that is in their purview. We feel that it should be in your purview, and that's the tension. So from my point of view, I think that's the messaging to the governor, is you need local control.
I would point out that the DEC has a very wide-ranging portfolio, and will continue to have a great many things on their plate. I would make the pitch that this isn't taking power away from the DEC, but rather reducing a burden on DEC for ensuring that local wetlands are properly protected, and as opposed to, you know, there being a fight over whose patch. I think I'd make the pitch that it's a money saver for the state if the localities step in and do some of the work consistent with the interests of DEC in the state. And I also think that if there is a large amount of cards and letters that show up, it makes an impact that people are watching and people are paying attention. So I think as many individuals as reach out with a consistent message, I think is a positive way to go.
Thank you very much.
All right, for our next question, this is for either of you. Water quality in many of our lakes across the state has been declining for decades, primarily due to excessive nutrients, which I liked that Senator Harckham had touched on, water quality issues. Algal growth has increased in the recent years, toxic algae as well. For Cayuga Lake, we know that the phosphates levels have increased by 30% since 1990s from the Upstate Freshwater Institute data. We also know that agricultural runoff is the primary source of phosphates, especially in rural areas. In the draft TMDLs, total maximum daily loads, for Cayuga Lake from 2021, the DEC estimated that the portion of phosphate pollution coming from agricultural sources like crops, hay, and pasture runoff was more than 90% of all the phosphates entering the lake. What is the state doing to address this serious, longstanding, and growing problem?
Well, I don't think we're doing enough, but and I do think that it is the tension between environmental protection and our friends in the agricultural sector is real. They feel that they are good stewards of the land, and they feed us, and so there is a serious tension. I would suggest that, again, turning to nature, and I think New York State needs to do a great deal more in reforesting much of the state, especially areas near bodies of water. There was a great article in mid to late August in the New York Times. It was really, I think, focused on more towards cities and villages, but I think could be applied across the state. The quick growing mini forests that a very high concentration of the right kind of synergistic trees and shrubs in very high quality soil can grow very rapidly. And I think that doing some of that so that we're actually letting the soil filter and act as a break, if you will, is part of it. And some of it is also maybe encouraging a different way of fertilizing our farmland. And that I'll bore people at some other point on the very exciting roundtable on composting. But I think that helping farmers shift and encouraging more organic farming and natural farming, which will be a long haul, is part of the answer. I don't think we can just tell them to stop using all fertilizers, but that clearly is a problem. So you have to do something to absorb the runoff.
Yeah, I would add a couple of things. My district is under enhanced TMDL restrictions. So we're already dealing with this, and a big part of it is, as Chair Glick said, recreating our wetlands. We've destroyed so many wetlands that municipalities in my district are now on the hook for tens of millions of dollars to build stormwater catchment that are essentially artificial wetlands. And so that's part of the solution. In my district and other parts of the state, a lot of the enhanced phosphate load comes from failing septics. So infrastructure, both sewers and high-tech septic systems that actually treat effluent and not just put it into the soil are part of the solution. And unfortunately, the challenge is agriculture is exempt from the Clean Water Act. And so there are federal preemptions that make it very challenging. So if we cannot have the ability to regulate, then as the chair said, we've got to do a much better job on stormwater management. And that's berms, that's wetlands, that's catchment areas. It's all of the above. And not to mention then the infrastructure, septics, and sewer systems. So it's a complex problem. Part of it is also people don't know how to navigate the state's program. The state needs to do a much better job of how municipalities and lake districts get access to funding. Lake associations can't even get any funding. So we have a bill on that. And I understand they're essentially private lakes, but the water flows, elsewhere. In our district, we have a lot of these small lake associations, but all of the water flows into the New York City watershed. So we need to find ways to get them study money and infrastructure money to protect that water that's flowing other places.
Excellent. Thank you. I'm going to take a question from the audience. And so I think, Peter, you were the first one, and I'll ask you to unmute here.
Okay. Yes. It's good to see you, Senator Harckham, as always, good friend. And what I'd like to ask is, how close are we to allowing county and state parks to install solar canopies on their parking lots, amending the park alienation law? And I think that would be just a real big game changer for us. That's it.
Thanks, Pete. That's a bill that we're going to work on with our colleagues in the Assembly on amending. We know they have some well-founded concerns, so we're happy to work with them there. But you're right. For local town parks like the baseball field and the town pool, it's a great way to do community solar. So that's on the to-do list for this session.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Next question from the chat I have is, please give a status of the climate change super fund requiring oil and gas producers to contribute to the super fund for climate change adaptations and mitigation.
I'm sorry, what was the question again?
Yeah, it was about the status update on the climate change super fund requiring oil and gas producers to contribute to that super fund for climate change adaptations and mitigations. Oh,
Senator Krueger's bill.
I guess so.
Yeah, and that's also something that the Attorney General could do unilaterally. We just saw that California is suing a number of the major oil companies for climate damage, which is essentially the same thing. So that's Senator Krueger's bill. Which would require the oil companies to pay for the damage done to climate change, or we can encourage the Attorney General to do the same.
So is there a status on where it's sitting? They're looking for a status update.
Well, everything starts new next year.
Okay.
So everything starts from zero next year. Every single bill that we've talked about that's not been passed in both houses starts from zero, and we amend and we change and we try and work together on.
Great. Thank you. All right. That was a text question. Now we're going to go to another in-person one. We have the, I don't have a person's name here, but the Federated Conservatists. I will ask you to unmute. Oh, Conservationists, sorry.
Hi, yes, this is Tracy Stora. I'm the chair of the City of Rye CCAC, but also work for the Federated Conservationists of Westchester County as the program director. I find that CACs and sustainability committees are often the unsung heroes of land use and environmental preservation in municipalities. Is there an opportunity with the Environmental Bond Act to resurrect state funding to support environmental management councils in our counties across New York? I know there used to be something with LEAP funding that used to support these councils, but I was wondering if there's an opportunity now with the Environmental Bond Act. I've been visiting a lot of the CAC meetings in my county, and the general consensus is that there's a definite need for community and support among each other, and also an opportunity to share knowledge and experience with each other.
Well, I think I think there's sort of conservation coordinators that certain things tend to fall by the wayside, and probably all the more true in the last administration. So I think that we're both hopeful that there will be an opportunity in the Bond Act to do a great deal to invigorate and support on the ground projects and programs, including things like the soil and water conservation folks are always sort of chasing after grants, and it would be nice for them to have some sort of consistent dollars that are coming out of the Bond Act. So I don't know about Senator Harckham, but I'm waiting with bated breath for clarification on what and how much we can, in fact, provide to the on-the-ground work that really carries the load.
Yeah, I agree with Chair Glick. The important thing is getting boots on the ground, getting the money to the boots on the ground for the local projects. As you said, you are the unsung heroes. You're the ones who know your communities, you know the issues. We know the flooding down in Rye, Mamaroneck, Larchmont, and you're the folks who've been through that. The challenge with the Bond Act is because it's capital bond money, most of it has to go to kind of bricks and mortar versus personnel. With any Bond Act, there's always a certain amount that can go toward administration, and that's the small part that can go towards salaries. But certainly, as Chair Glick mentioned, getting money to those local projects, it doesn't have to be only municipalities that are applying for this funding. Nonprofits can apply as well. And so the goal will be to encourage DEC to get a lot of this money out locally.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right, thank you. The next question from the chat was in response to our discussion about pesticides, and it was about how about changing the law that prohibits local municipalities from legislating pesticide restrictions? Would that ever be possible? And to clarify, this was for yard pesticides, not just for wetlands.
One of the interesting things, and first I want to give Deb great credit for birds and bees. That was a great bill. I'm hopeful the governor will sign it. Pesticides are a big problem in regulating them, and DEC used to have over 35 people in their pesticide management group, and it's down to a handful now. And so they essentially follow the federal government's lead and we know the federal government doesn't do a very good job. So we need to beef up the pesticide section. We need to do more legislatively. There was a study that came out last year. It was a national study, and of the people studied, 80% had the active ingredient of Roundup in their urine. And I don't know about anybody on the Zoom, but none of us have voluntarily like taken a shot of Roundup in the last year. So the fact that it's in all of our urine is just a testament to how widespread and rampant and dangerous this is. Not to mention the touching of the hundreds of other chemicals that we encounter on a daily basis. So I would love to see, local control, but I would love to see the state DEC do a much more forceful job in actually regulating pesticides versus kind of, they manage the application, they do a good job in the application sense and working with farmers and working with golf courses, but we need to do a much better job statewide of reducing the amount of pesticides that we're using in our communities.
Excellent, thank you. All right, we're going to go to in person. Ethan, I will ask you to unmute.
Hi, thank you. So I'm asking this question as a private citizen and a member of an organization called Nuclear New York. I'm Senator Harckham and Assembly Member Glick. I'm concerned that fear has trumped science and the outcome prohibiting a controlled release of stored water at the Indian Point nuclear reactor that's being decommissioned. The Federal Nuclear Regulatory Commission regulates such discharges, and these discharges have been legal for decades because the science establishing its safety is so firmly established. While I understand the aversion to and fear factor associated with the discharge of water with trivial amounts of tritium, is there room to discuss the actual merits in science? I think of how some anti-immigration arguments, for instance, try to drum up unfounded fear about immigrants. Emotionally, that can be persuading to some, but the facts don't bear out. I'm thinking of an analogy that might be closer to the reality of the Indian Point discharges. Imagine if we passed laws prohibiting people from flushing their toilets. On one level of understanding, it is concerning that we flush away waste through pipes all through our cities. But the reason is that that wastewater is treated and released to the environment with drastically reduced levels that do not pose a threat. The same is true for the waters from Indian Point. They are highly treated and the last remaining bits do not pose a threat. I'm concerned that letting fear trump science leads us down the wrong path, and in the quest to provide clean power for our energy transition can jeopardize approaches such as advanced nuclear power, which the scientific community overall recognizes is needed to address climate change. Are you open to further discussions about these topics? And sorry that was so long, felt like I had to be thorough.
I thank you for your question, Ethan, but I would really disagree with several of the assumptions that you've made. We spoke at great length in our decommissioning oversight board. We heard testimony from folks who said there are no safe levels of tritium. And this is what the public is so upset about, is the notion that they have to accept what regulators are saying is safe. But we didn't base the law on health and safety because that's what the NRC regulates. We based it on economic protection of the vitality of the lower Hudson River Valley. And the Supreme Court upheld a California decision on this that said states can regulate economic protection. And dozens of municipalities have staked their revitalization on their proximity to the Hudson River. And that's why 34 of them passed resolutions in support of this. I also, just from my own personal standpoint, would push back on the notion that the entire scientific community is on board with nuclear as a way forward through our green energy crisis. That's certainly something that's a hotbed. There are many people who oppose that notion. So, you know, I appreciate the question, but it's you know, it's something that you know, I think people are beginning to reject this notion that there are acceptable levels of pollution.
All right, thank you. The next question is from the chat, and it's coming up with from a local person, and Carrie Copeland-Galaire. And it's about the Cargill salt mines, which, if you're not familiar, the Cargill salt mines underlie most of Cayuga Lake, which is a huge freshwater lake. And her question are that some New Yorkers are very concerned about the possible sale of the Cargill salt mines because it is up. We've been heard it's up for sale. Their salt enterprise, Cargill's. It's in Lansing, New York. And they're concerned about the sale due to the continued environmental risks, especially to the lake. What is the chance that the New York DEC could require an environmental impacts statement, an EIS, prior to any continued mining, plus a robust closure plan and an adequate bond? And the bond would need to be somewhere on the $10 billion range to protect the Cayuga Lake.
Well, I think that I don't know the details of the sale, so I don't want to opine directly on that. I will just say that New York State produces a tremendous amount of salt, which is provided not just through our state, but across the country. And the overuse of salt on the roads has an impact throughout the state. And there was a recent report, which I have not yet read, from the I would assume it wasn't just DEC, but also DOT, a task force report on the use, potential overuse, and alternatives. So I don't know that DEC is going to require, and I'm not certain under what auspices they would require an environmental impact statement on the sale. But certainly the entire issue of the uses of salt, and therefore any expansion of salt mining, is of concern because of the impact that it is already having in as part of road runoff, stormwater runoff.
Excellent, thank you. All right, Simon, you get to be up again.
I can ask questions all day, but I'm being polite and letting other people ask questions. One question, actually, this is directed to Chair Glick, and not so much as your role as the chair of the environmental committee in the assembly, but as in more of your district issues. One of the nice things about NYSAC is that we do bring people together from various parts of the state. And one group that we've discovered a few years ago was the Manhattan Solid Waste Advisory Panel. And we've been in touch with them on numerous occasions. They're members of NYSAC. I had a very productive discussion with them recently about landfills in upstate New York. These people in Manhattan know that landfills, that's all their garbage coming from Manhattan going to upstate New York. It's affecting a lot of people in the state. There was a front page article in the New York Times a few days ago about a particular landfill that was going to close in a few years and now has extended it to 2040. So we're trying to bring those two groups together. Manhattan, actually all the boroughs of New York that are exporting, and the communities in upstate New York that are receiving it. But my question to you is, what can New York State do at this point to address the issues of New York City's solid waste? You by far, of course, are producing the most in the state. How can we resolve this issue of landfills continuing to be postponed from closing?
Well, thank you very much for the question.
Thank you.
I think there are a few disparate thoughts, but I think important that they come together in that. I think the disposable generation is aging out, and young people are being much more sensitive to consumerism and reducing waste and what gets thrown out. And so we have Grow NYC, which is not just about composting, but does things like swap meats and stuff so that people aren't disposing of things, but exchanging them with others. And I think that clearly we have I think we have something like 24 million pounds of stuff that gets sent to our picked up daily. And 35% of that roughly is compostable. So that's why we are focusing on trying to get more of our waste product out, not just, and ensuring that our New York City Parks Department takes its own waste, yard waste and the like, and composts that and doesn't wind up sending any of that to any kind of landfill. The entire downstate region, actually, it's not just New York City, but Long Island has no landfill. It likewise sends all of its waste elsewhere. And so it's a major issue, and some of it is going to be squeezing down on compostable material and getting it out of the waste stream. And Senator Harckham and I are working on an EPR, extended producer responsibility, so that we incentivize manufacturers to use less packaging, less material. It saves them money over time. I think the one thing that we don't confront is that they use a lot of their packaging for marketing purposes. They're going to have to rethink all of what they do in terms of delivering product to the market. So that's something that will provide resources to communities, municipalities to absorb the cost. But the reality is we have to stop shipping. We have to stop producing as much stuff, recycle as much as possible, and ensure that what manufacturers are saying is recyclable is in fact recyclable. Our friend Judith Eng tells us that New Yorkers are very good. They over recycle. They over recycle because they think that things are recyclable when they're not. So we can't have manufacturers telling us that these are things that can be recycled. We have to see that we have a bottle bill so that those materials wind up getting not getting pitched, water bottles, juice bottles, and that those materials likewise are taken out of a waste stream.
And Simon, if I can also add to what Chair Glick mentioned, you know, it's not just New York City and Long Island. In Westchester, you know, all our waste is incinerated. So all of those trucks are going to Peekskill with their emissions to the Peekskill residents. And so they're, you know, what is a solution for us in one place are problems for folks in another place. And the issue of plastics that Chair Glick brought up, only 14% of plastics are actually recycled in New York State. We're ahead of the national average, which is 9%, but only 14%. Everything else either goes to landfill or incinerator. So the whole point behind the producer responsibility bill is to, one, get producers to have financial skin in the game to encourage them to reduce the amount of packaging. And two, we've also set very robust recycled content for everything, for cardboard, for plastic, for glass, so that we're not sending things to landfills, and we can have a more circular economy, and we're not, in addition to not sending to landfills, we're cutting down on the amount of material we're sending for incineration as well.
Kate, I do have another question, but I'll certainly wait and I'll give another person a chance to speak, and I'll
Yeah. Why don't you wait we only have 15 minutes left. So I'm going to ask this question, which I'd love to hear from both of you guys, which is talking about the legislation that we're going to see in the next year or your next session. And what are the pieces of legislation that you feel are going to make the greatest difference in the state and that need support? Not the ones that it's going to be fine to pass and not a problem and that the governor's going to sign, but where do you need support? And how do members of CACs, conservation groups, EMCs support those? What is the most effective way for us to support those pieces of legislation?
Well, I would just say lobbying 101 is to have members of your organizations come to Albany or go to people's district offices and speak to them directly. I've always found that's the most impactful, is when groups of my constituents come to see me in Albany or come to see me in the district office. I think that is it's one thing to like send a tweet, send an email, make a phone call, but when people come and see me face to face, eye to eye, that is by far the best lobbying. I think a huge bill that we're going to need help with is the EPR bill that Chair Glick and I have been talking about, because companies are very reluctant to change their marketing practices. She rightly says that it's about marketing. We have shampoo bottles that are designed to look like the Eiffel Tower. That has nothing to do with the efficacy of the product. It's all about catching the eye on the shelf. And so they're very resistant to change. So we're going to need a lot of help there. The thing that I look forward to seeing is assembly members and senators are right now generating their new bills. So when we get back in a session in January, both Chair Glick and we will have dozens of new bills referred to our committee that we'll begin reviewing. So there'll be a whole new process of bills. A lot of the bills that we'll take up next year, we don't even have yet. So I look forward to seeing what our colleagues submit. She and I will each have them. But I look forward to seeing what the new bills are. But we sort of laid out the priority areas, protecting clean water, climate change, obviously, and those are two of the big ones, and pesticides and chemicals.
Yeah, I think that the senator's totally right that there's a lot that is percolating that is not yet before us, but I think the areas that are going to see tremendous, aside from our own EPR, we'll give that one more plug, but certainly things around water quality and regulation of PFAS and PFOA. So those are things that they are everywhere. They are in, I have a bill on personal care products, and it's not just manufacturers in general that are making the products and use it. It is the chemical industry. The Chemistry Association, which has 12 different divisions, show up there. The New York City division of the Chemical Association, and the American Chemical Association, and then the Plastics Institute. They are out there saying, oh, plastic, we can take care of every kind of plastic, and we can make new plastic from old plastic. Totally a complete lie. And all of this comes from the fossil fuel industry, because these are byproducts of oil. So I think that we're going to need a lot of help on a lot of different specific bills, but the areas of concern or the fight that is going to be had is going to be over regulating pesticides and other forever chemicals, and things like the heat bill, which it has to do with requiring gas utilities to provide a hookup for anybody who, the last 100 feet towards a gas pipeline. That's had a lot of attention, not in my committee. I'm very happy that there's an energy committee, and I suspect that the senator is as well. So there are, because there's just too much on your plate if you have both environmental protection and energy. But there are going to be a whole lot of issues around making it incentivizing green energy. So those are the kinds of things that, and a gentleman brought up for towns and villages, solar canopies. We've had conversations with NYSERDA about all of the failing large malls, and those being opportunities for green energy development. So there's a lot for folks to pay attention to and to work on. And I do think that in person is probably best, but I also think that if people take the time to actually write a letter, it's much more impactful than pushing a button on an automatic email.
Yeah, and so as a collective, as like NYSEC, or our different EMCs, a lot of us, our representatives are already supportive of these measures. So what kind of collective or group effort can we be putting in to show a greater support for it, and maybe doing some education or outreach beyond just our legislator?
Well, I do think that, look, we've passed some great bills and we hope to pass some more through the legislature, but ultimately nothing is a law until the governor signs it. And I think that the governor is a single person who has all of the pressure of these very well-funded associations and industries. And so really countering them by having people power, activating people on the ground to write to the governor. I think the governor needs to know that New Yorkers care about each and every one of these concerns and will see that the buck stops at her signature.
Okay. We've had a couple requests for this question, so I want to make sure I ask it, and then maybe we can finish up with Annie's. So this is from a few members wanted to ask this. According to the International Monetary Fund, global fossil fuel subsidies in 2022 totaled a record of $7 trillion, and that's 13 million per minute. New York State provides about $1.4 billion each year in fossil fuel subsidies. What is your position on trying to eliminate or at least reduce these state subsidies?
There are a few bills in both houses that we're trying to work through and get across the line. The comptroller has also voluntarily said that the pension funds will begin divesting from fossil fuel. I'll be coming out with a bill later in the year regarding subsidies for and tax breaks for aviation fuel. I don't think we should be giving any public financial benefits for fossil fuel. It's the policy of New York State to wean ourselves from fossil fuel. And so we've got to do everything we can in that regard. Now, having said that, we also need, as part of the just transition we talk about in the CLCPA, there are a lot of mom and pop, home propane businesses and home heating oil businesses that we need to help in the transition as we electrify our homes and our building stock. So I don't want to say no money ever for anyone ever related to the fossil fuel industry, because that's part of the just transition. But as far as the larger tax breaks and those kind of subsidies, we need to end those.
All right. We got 5 minutes left. Let's see how many questions we can get in. Annie, would you like to ask your question?
Sure. Thank you, Senator and Assembly Member. So I'm Annie Corman from Tompkins County, one of our legislators here. And so I want to thank you, first off, for working on issues such as extended producer responsibility to help defer the costs and management of products that, back to the producer versus the counties and then the local taxpayers having to pay, whether it's landfilling or the fake recycling. My pressing question today is, at Tompkins County, we are trying to set an example for our community and the state of trying to go as green as possible in our facilities. And we've been set back quite a bit because of the high costs of construction, and wondering if you see any assistance coming on a state level for that.
I'm not sure what facilities you are referring to, but that there clearly are local funding for a variety of projects out of the Environmental Protection Fund, hopefully out of the Bond Act. There may in fact be, and again, it'll be interesting to see what the process will be for IRA dollars. But a lot of that is going to be capital. And so some of those construction costs could possibly be mitigated by those types of funding.
And just to add on, you had mentioned the costs incurred to municipalities for waste. That's one of the prime drivers of the bill, the EPR bill that Chair Glick and I have. New York City estimates it'll save them $1.5 million. NYSAC estimates it'll save the rest of the state $1 million, because the producers of the materials and the packaging and the waste that's being generated will have to contribute funds to the infrastructure. Because I know in my district and other districts, the cost to consumers or taxpayers for just managing waste have gone up exponentially. Out here, carters have had to add a second and a third day of pickup because there's so much waste. And one of the main points of this bill is to make the producers of the waste begin to pay for the recycling equipment and the other waste disposal equipment, so to take the onus off of taxpayers and municipalities.
Thank you. And just to clarify, by facilities, I meant municipal-owned buildings.
All right, in the last 2 minutes, we had a couple of questions around the lovely topic of PFAS or PFOAs. And this is kind of shaping up, we're learning enough about it, and emerging contaminants, I guess, in general. This is shaping up to be kind of the next generation's lead crisis, where we're going to be dealing with this for a long time. And I know our own Tompkins County's own Assembly member, Anna Kellis, has presented a bill around that. And so I was kind of asking, the question was around what is the state looking at doing to be a leader in solutions and protections around PFAS?
Well, as we both said, that PFAS will be a priority as we go into the new term. As we said, the governor tried last time, wasn't quite successful. We want to work with her on allocating money in the budget for the discovery of PFAS, and that municipalities should not be at risk if there's no fault to them. We don't want people to hide PFAS. We want to encourage them to come forward when they discover it, both municipalities, school districts. We need to work with the Attorney General to hold polluters accountable if they knowingly were dumping or using chemicals with PFAS in it. We shouldn't be holding, again, taxpayers and municipalities accountable. So you're right. It is going to be, it's going to get much worse because we're discovering it more and more and more, and it's in every community. So this will be a huge topic of concern for both of us as we move forward.
And I think under the clean water initiatives that we have had, it's, you know, over a number of years, $5 billion has been allocated, and there have been additional dollars already from the Bond Act. Water treatment plants have to do testing, and they need additional resources. And it's not clear that they have the chemistry to do the kind of cleanup that is going to be required. So it's a big issue, and with a lot of moving parts. So I would say stay tuned to not just pieces of legislation, but things that may come out of initiatives, that may come out of recommendations from on the ground.
Great, thank you. We have reached our allotted time. I want to be respectful of both of your times and for everyone else moving on to sessions. Just if there's anything in closing you want to say, or any way, we didn't get to all of the questions, we got to a bunch of them. And if there's any ways that people can reach out to you to get their additional questions answered. I saw Assemblymember Glick, you put your information in the chat. Maybe you could do it again at the end here so we can capture that, and any last closing remarks. And thank you both very much.
Yeah, and Sylvie Sherlock, my legislative director, put my contact info and her contact info. Please feel free to reach out to us with questions, with ideas. And I'll close the way I open. Thank you all for what you do, because much of the progress we make environmentally is done at the local level, and that's thanks to all of you. So it's great to be here, great discussion, and look forward to working with you collaboratively moving forward.
I want to just echo that. It's been a pleasure being here with all of you, and thank you for the work you do on the ground. It informs what we can and should be doing, and I very much hope that you will reach out to us. It's probably best to reach out to my Albany staff, which is where a lot of the legislative work is done. And so that's where the team is more prepared to respond to questions. So I just put that in there for you all to give us a shout. Thank you.
Excellent. All right.
Thanks.
Thank you all. And we're going to have a little break here. Thank you, Assemblymember and Senator. You guys can head out. And for everyone else that's moving on, we have just a quick break here before we move on to the next sessions that will start up again.